I get so sick of just the angry Twitter stuff. It's worthless. I just want everyone to be happy, Joshua.
Yeah. I mean, I think people should be pretty pissed off. I think people aren't pissed off enough, honestly.
Maybe.
Like, like 200 years ago, not 100 years ago, people would have fucking like stormed the White House during this type of shit. Just being totally left out to dry.
Or they would just be dying.
I mean, I really think it's like people are just trained into to be submissive and passive. I mean, everyone still has phones, you know, everyone can still fucking forget their troubles momentarily. But like these people in Bolivia who like took to the streets violently, like they didn't have fucking Netflix and smartphones to pacify them.
They probably had smartphones.
No, they didn't. In 1999.
Oh yeah, not in 1999. Forgot that we were going back in time. They probably had flip phones. Actually, they probably didn't have flip phones in 1999, come to think of it.
I saw like I was starting to watch the beginning of like a 2011 documentary about the water crises. Actually, like a new version of it. And it was like showing rural Bolivia. And I mean, those people definitely have no electricity whatsoever. I was saying, like, people are gonna have to like get to like really fucking broken down before like anything changes, because apparently like politicians aren't responsive to anything, and because they know they don't have to be yet.
He walked out in the gray light and stood, and he saw for a brief moment the absolute truth of the world. The cold, relentless circling of the intestate earth. Darkness implacable. The blind dogs of the sun in their running. The crushing black vacuum of the universe. And somewhere 200 animals trembling like ground foxes in their cover. Borrowed time and borrowed world and borrowed eyes with which to sorrow it.
And lo, for the earth was empty of form, and void, and darkness was all over the face of the deep, and we said, look at that fucker dance.
Welcome to fuck shit of the Deathiverse. Doesn't matter what day it is.
Cheer up.
No.
Cheery. At least you have water, man.
Yeah. What do we do on this podcast? We talk about
rainbows,
how horrible the world is.
Usually.
One example of that, if we jump in the time machine here and go backwards.
Where are we going?
We're going to Bolivia circa 1997-ish.
What's Bolivia?
Bolivia is a country.
I didn't take any.
The continent of South America.
Oh, okay.
So we're starting with the basics. Nation states and whatnot.
It's a landlocked country.
Are you looking up Bolivia?
Just thought you should know that.
What's the major export? Textiles?
I think so.
Anywho, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was massive privatization of the water supply in Bolivia, and it led to a people's uprising, basically, and it led to some deaths and a lot of injuries. And also kind of led to the political career of Evo Morales, I'll call him a hero. I don't know a ton about everything he's done, but what I do know, I like the leader of MAS, the Movement for Socialism Party. He was the president at one point, but he was like chased out. He actually recently came back to Bolivia, just like very recently.
Yeah, he won the election in 2005 with a 53% vote. He planned on renationalizing Bolivians' hydrocarbon assets following protests which demanded action.
Those sound like the protests we're going to talk about.
They do. And August 2006, at the Bolivian Constituent Assembly, he began writing a new constitution aimed at giving more power to the majority of Bolivians. Less, I guess, to the government.
And he's also the first indigenous person to be president. But this water privatization, how did it begin? Well, the World Bank.
Boo. World Bank, boo.
Like actually multiple international banking institutions swept in, as they do, into countries all around the world. And
can I make a little aside?
Go ahead.
So some of the students I teach, which I've been teaching now since they were third graders, they're in fifth grade now. But for some reason, in one of our classes where I was teaching a lesson on ancient money, one of the pictures is a picture of a banker. And I think maybe I've had like an effect on these kids because I show them the picture of bankers and all the kids in my class are something like, "We don't like bankers." I'm like, yes. If anything, I've done a job here by teaching these kids anytime there's a banker in a picture. I'm just like, we don't like bankers. There's a few units I have where there's one where there's a bank robber. I'm like, it's okay because he's just robbing a bank.
It's going to backfire and they're just going to become anti-Semites, though.
Oh, no. I didn't even consider this.
Be careful, man.
I'm just teaching them not to like banks.
Be careful. Don't use the word globalist.
No. For some reason, when I talk to my fourth and fifth graders, I just try to explain everything away with the natural lottery and how the natural lottery basically makes all of life unfair. So it's people's duty to try to make things more fair for each other. Anyway, back to Evo Morales. Do you think his name's short for evolution?
No. Also, we weren't there when you stopped.
Oh, we were past Evo. We were on to the crisis.
Yeah, the topic of today.
The Bechtel Corp, the World Bank.
Bechtel, man.
like I said, the Bechtel Court. I think I said the Bechtel Court that time.
This podcast is just a series of mispronunciations and me groaning.
I'll learn to speak pretty one day. Probably not.
So the World Bank and the International Development Bank, they decided to give loans to the Bolivian government because they are so indebted and whatnot. And then, of course, some lovely corporations came in, one from the United States called the Bechtel Corporation, and they offered a deal with the Bolivian government to privatize the water.
Why would you do that?
To make money. Lots of money. It says here that renouncing this deal was seen as unthinkable to the leaders of Bolivia, who felt pressure to keep the trust of international investors, as they had seen the problems in Argentina before that were partially caused by not having enough credibility with international bankers. So many of the poorest neighborhoods were not connected to the network of water systems and paid even more money for lower quality water from trucks.
That's so messed up.
Cooperative wells built before the privatization could be expanded on and taken over by the Bechtel subsidiary at the expense of those who used the well and had often already paid for the existing structure. And I know just from previous stuff that like this resulted in like the average Bolivian paying like something like a third of their already very, low incomes to just to have any kind of clean water.
Yeah.
And eventually this resulted in the Cochabamba Water Wars, as they're called, which are just big protests and could be summarized like as so. In early 2000, protests against the raised price of water due to privatization had been growing, and martial law was declared. In April 2000, Victor Hugo Daza, a 17-year-old student, was shot in the face by the Bolivian army while protesting the increase of local water rates. The man who killed him, Captain Robinson Iriarte, was trained as a counterinsurgent in the United States. He was acquitted of all responsibility for the murder in 2002. No civilian criminal justice system would take the case on, so a military tribunal had final jurisdiction. I'm sure that led to some justice, right? The military tribunal?
I'm certain it did.
Oh, wait, I see here. Upon his acquittal, he was promoted to major. Shoot a kid in the face for protesting water prices.
Is he a general now?
Probably. Thousands of people captured the central plaza in Cochabamba and surrounded the fountain where Daza's body lay. Protesters comprised peasant irrigators, retired factory workers, union members, peace workers, sweatshop employees, street vendors, students from the University of Cochabamba, coca leaf farmers, and residential children.
During the protest, the peaceful protest that turned violent, I think 175 people were injured. Maybe none were killed. It doesn't say anyone was killed during this protest. Someone had to be killed, right?
Well, I just told you about the teenager who was shot in the face.
But did he die?
He was shot in the face, man. Yes, he died.
You don't always die from that.
He died. 6 people died. I forget where I read that, but I read it somewhere. Yes, 6 dead, 175 injured. So I guess the reason we bring this up is because recently on Wall Street, what happened, Jason?
Wall Street's been talking about making water into a commodity.
Well, it has been made into a commodity.
It has been made into a commodity. The reason I say talking about is because I saw the articles. And, I mean, it's not a profitable commodity yet. So they've made it into a commodity, but it's not like they're profiting from it, right? Yet.
I don't know, really.
But, I mean, if they make it into a commodity, they want to figure out a way to profit from it.
You would assume, yeah.
There are some people in Wall Street. I did see something. Yeah, so Wall Street begins trading water futures as a commodity. That was news from 2 days ago. I've seen some people say, like, because I was looking into this earlier today, that some finance people say that this will absolutely fail because there's plenty of water on Earth and rich people happen to live in the areas where there's a lot of water, a lot of the fresh water. But then other people think that, no, making water a major commodity will definitely make profits because if it becomes something that's traded on as far as futures and, like, there are, like, problems with water. Like, there's, I think, only, like, 1% or 1% of the Earth's water is actually drinkable water, and the rest of it's, like, salt water. And, which is one of the big problems of water shortages. And, like, you know, a lot of places where we're doing farming now or like agriculture are areas that aren't necessarily like big like water producers. They don't have like the best fresh water, so like they have to have water shipped in for the irrigation processes. Like when we decide to grow plants in deserts and other places, it don't really make sense because like the places that might be really good for growing plants that became more economically stable, yada yada, and they're not really used for farmland anymore. So we've had to push that off to regions that you know don't have nice rivers running through them and decide to grow our plants there, which means there's water transportation, so we sell water to them. So maybe it makes complete sense to sell futures on it because the places that desperately need water for like agriculture activities will have to buy it from the places who, I mean, obviously everywhere needs the agriculture and the food, but yeah, it just seems fucked up. All of it seems really fucked up to me that we're trading in water. It's almost like trading in houses or food.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard insane like venture capitalist types say that like every square inch of the world should be privatized, and that would actually protect the environment because there would be vested interests in every like cubic foot of air and water and forest. And I gotta call bullshit on that.
Imagine buying your airtime.
I mean, the thing is like air is already basically for sale. Like that's what like cap and trade basically is.
Yeah.
Like, at least clean air is for sale.
I wish I had clean air today.
Or more or less polluted air is for sale in a way. Depending on where you live, I guess. But yeah, this seems like the natural progression towards catastrophe. And the example of the Bolivian water wars is, I think, you know, it's a clear, like, it's a smaller level version of it, but
yeah,
imagine that happening on like a more global scale. Which, I mean, I don't know a ton about how trading on Wall Street really works, but like, it seems to me that this is just a bad step in the wrong direction.
So this is what The article from Bloomberg says, but the country's first water market launched on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange this week with $1.1 billion in contracts tied to water prices in California, which, California is one of our biggest agricultural areas, and also they have a lot of water problems.
Right.
So the market allows farmers, hedge funds, and municipalities to hedge bets on the future price of water and water availability in the American West. The new trading scheme was announced in September, prompted by the region's worsening heat, drought, and wildfires fueled by climate change. There were 2 trades when the market went live Monday. So climate change, droughts, and population growth and pollution are likely to make water scarcity issues and pricing a hot topic for years to come. We are definitely going to watch how these new water futures contracts develop, and proponents argue the new market will clear up some of the uncertainty around water prices for farmers and municipalities, helping them budget for the resource. But some experts say treating water as a tradable commodity puts a basic human right into the hands of financial institutions and investors, a dangerous arrangement as climate change alters precipitation patterns and increases water scarcity. What this represents is a cynical attempt at setting up what's almost like a betting casino so some people can make money from others' suffering. Basov Sin, climate justice project director at the Institute for Policy Studies, told Earther, "My first reaction when I saw this was horror, but we've also seen this coming for quite some time." So yeah, I mean, it's kind of screwed up, and it all I think it's messed up because there's the people that are going to be trading on this. They say that sure, farmers and municipalities can buy into this, but it's going to be Wall Street buying into it. It's going to be already rich people, and it's just going to allow them to kind of have more control over how the water is used. And there are water shortages, but some of it comes from just misuse. One of the big reasons water gets wasted in the United States is because we don't have great infrastructure. Something I don't remember the exact statistic I saw, but I was reading about this earlier, and I'll look it up. But I think it was something 30% of water is wasted in the United States because we just have leaky pipes everywhere. We just haven't updated our water management systems in so long. I mean, obviously not all of them are as bad as say Flint, but if we just put money into infrastructure, we would save a ton of water, and it would actually just go along longer, I guess. Water never actually goes away. It's just it does take money to treat it, yada yada.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe instead of selling it as a tradable commodity on Wall Street, maybe we should just be trying to fix current infrastructure. And also a lot of the farms we use, which are not always in the best locations, and we're often not growing the best crops for it. California is big for almonds, but almonds are terrible for water. They just use a ton of water that we don't really have for them. Or most Americans,
the meat industry.
Yeah, I was going to say most Americans and most of the world now live on a heavy protein diet, which uses way more water than if people would just live on a mostly plant-based diets.
I mean, there are undeniable good arguments for veganism. That's environmental arguments are one of them, I think. Yeah. And neither of us are vegetarians by any stretch.
I'm not.
But I also know how immoral I am to not be. I acknowledge that it is the morally superior position. It undeniably is. Like, even if you don't buy into the ethical argument of like animal rights or like, unnecessary suffering that it causes, or even like, there's levels. Like some vegans would say that like even like giving animals like a nice lifespan and a grass-fed diet in like an open, area, and then still slaughtering them and eating them is still ultimately unethical. But anyway, that's like a totally different subject. But I think
it's tied to the water.
I'm saying that the ethical argument is.
Oh yeah, the ethical argument
separate from the. I mean, it's all ethical when you come down to it, but like the environmental argument alone is a reason why I've know some people have like, if not given up meat eating, like tried to reduce it drastically, especially red meat. I guess like raising cattle and dairy cows is like one of the worst offenders environmentally.
I think
it's like the methane and just all the water usage and everything like that.
I think instead of
and all the grains that we feed to these animals that like could be given to human beings that are starving.
Oh, sure. I know that like one of the big things that they're used to feed cattle is alfalfa sprouts, which sure, alfalfa sprouts, whatever. They actually take a lot of water like to grow. And that's like one of the main like feed crops for like cattle in the U.S.
Don't they feed cows just like straight up corn and stuff?
I think alfalfa sprouts are basic. Yes, they do. Just feeding them lots of corn, which also takes a lot of water.
Corn is so fucked up.
Well, corn's interesting because it's like
the corn industry.
I haven't
should say.
checked in a while, but at one point it was the most like subsistity. Like the government it has a ton of subsidies. Like the government gives people a lot of money to grow corn, so that's why Americans grow corn.
But there's like more than anyone could ever need. It's like, there's like too much of it. And it's because, like you say, the government just gives people subsidies to grow it for whatever reason. Yeah, I remember, I can't cite anything specifically other than the documentary I saw like 17 years ago, but like, it stuck with me that there's so much overproduction of milk in the United States. And like the milk that we produce there is also like really kind of vile. Like it's filled with all these hormones and antibiotics and stuff.
Yeah.
But there was so much overproduction of milk that the government was actually paying people to stop producing milk.
I've heard about that.
Anyway.
Wasn't that partly where like government cheese came from?
Oh,
like there was like such an overproduction of milk that that one of the programs they come up with was like the original government cheese program, where they would just be giving like sliced like cheese to like poor people because like we don't fucking know what to do with all this damn milk.
That could be it. That makes sense.
I remember,
to me.
Like it's been a while since I remember listening to like, I think it was an NPR like pre-podcast being popular report on like the history of government cheese, but this was probably also like 17 or 18 years ago that I heard all this.
That does sound like something you'd hear on NPR.
And I'm sure that I'm mixing up facts, but I really think that like the overabundance of milk was somehow related to that, which is a whole aside.
I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense to me in a way. Yeah, also just like this kind of fake nutritional push for milk that we kind of grew up with as kids, I feel like. I don't know if they still do that now, but you know,
they do it.
Does a body good, you know, milk.
Yeah.
Just like all these ads for just milk.
Well, a lot of that was paid for by dairy farmers because, well, they wanted to make sure milk was being sold.
Right.
But
I just know there's like, it's funny how, you know, people that are very pro, you know, the free market or whatever, how the market is inherently fair.
It's going to correct itself.
Creates the best outcomes and it's self-correcting. It's just led to these insane things about like the government having to pay people to stop creating milk or producing milk, and I don't know, just like
much like the way the free market corrected itself when it would tell people cigarettes were good for you.
Yeah. Or like when poor people couldn't get water anymore in Bolivia. Or in Flint, Michigan, for that matter.
What is happening in Flint, Michigan?
Still.
In some countries, or some cities in the world, they're getting real close to their day zero, right? Where they don't have enough like water for their populace.
Probably.
I think that happened to Cape Town not too long ago in South Africa. And other cities are projected to get there soon. Or like all their water has to be shipped in from like other parts of their country, other parts of the world.
I mean, I guess there are just parts of the world that need... I mean, water is being like transported all over the place. But it's not all due to climate change either. Like you said, there's just waste and there's mismanagement of this as being like a public utility. I mean, now it's literally being turned into a tradable commodity. And as we've seen, it's been privatized, and not just in Bolivia. Bolivia is just a famous,
it's a big example,
clear example where people fought against it. I mean, I'm trying to see here how like this all ended up in Bolivia, because I think it's still kind of ongoing in a way. I could be wrong. Oh, here's the other thing we should add to the whole story of the Bolivian water supply being privatized. So after the protests, so there was kind of a victory for the people in Cochabamba. So let's see, April 10th, 2000. Latest wave of protest-related violence culminates in historic victory for the residents of Cochabamba and their supporters. After 4 days in hiding, Oscar Oliveira signs an agreement with the Bolivian government that guarantees the withdrawal of Aguas del Tunare, which was the private company controlling the water, which was just like a front for the Bechtel group, basically kind of, shell companies within companies, all that kind of bullshit that they do. Grants control of Cochabamba's water to La Coordinadero, the grassroots coalition led by Oliveira, assures the release of detained protesters and promises the repeal of water privatization legislation. So we've got a victory here, it seems. Legislation that would have charged peasants for water drawn from local wells is also removed. April 12th, 2000. World Bank president states that water should not be publicly subsidized. When asked about the events in Cochabamba during a press conference in Washington, D.C., World Bank President James Wolfensohn, that's a Nazi name if I've ever heard one, maintains that people in Bolivia and elsewhere should be charged for the use of public services such as water, and public subsidies of such services lead to waste. So there's that argument of like, if we just let them have it for free, they're going to like throw it out the window and like just play with it. And like,
yeah, if we just
they're not going to value the water as much.
If we just let people use it for free and don't regulate it at all, they're just going to dump their trash and their chemicals into it and not take proper procedures to clean up their mess. But, as long as we let the market deal with it, surely they won't waste water by just throwing their leftover waste into it.
Or allow companies to pollute the water supply and then pay a small fine, which is basically nothing to them and still lets them profit. Continuing, according to Wolfensohn, the biggest problem with water is the waste of water through lack of charging. April 16th, 2000. Activists protest the IMF and World Bank meetings in Washington. Thousands of anti-globalization activists attempt to blockade IMF and World Bank meetings in downtown Washington. The protesters call for the cancellation of hundreds of billions of dollars in debt owed by the world's poorest nations and cite Bolivia as a recent example of corporate greed in the globalized marketplace. Oscar Oliveira is present, saying, "The people have recaptured their dignity, their capacity to organize themselves, and most important of all, the people are no longer scared." Jump ahead a year or so, August 6, 2001, the Bolivian president resigns. Suffering from lung and liver cancer, Hugo Banzer resigns and hands over the Bolivian presidency to 41-year-old vice president, I don't know how to say this name, Quiroga? Jorge Quiroga?
That seems right to me.
A Cochabamba native and former IBM executive. Quiroga is sworn in on August 7th to serve out the last year of Banzer's 5-year presidential term till August 2002. Under the provisions of the Constitution, Quiroga is barred from seeking re-election. Here comes the fun part. November 2001, soon after. Aguas del Tunare, the evil company working on behalf of Bechtel, basically, seeks restitution from Bolivian government. So now the companies want the fucking public to pay them back for all of this shit. Still.
Nonsense.
Aguas del Tunare applies to the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, the ICSID, an arbitration body created by the World Bank. I'm sure they'll be even-handed, fair-minded. Aguas del Tunare alleges that the Bolivian government violated a bilateral trade agreement with the Netherlands, where International Water Limited is incorporated. Look at all these fucking international companies, like, they're so disgusting. When it revoked the consortium's Cochabamba water contract. So they're like, the people rose up in Cochabamba, changed this shit, the legislation, got their water back, made it a public utility again, and now they're suing them for it.
Yeah.
Also, we kind of skipped over one of the leaders of this movement is Oscar Oliveira. So soon after this, Oscar Oliveira, is arrested by Bolivian authorities on charges of sedition, conspiracy, instigating public disorder, and criminal association. Warrants based on similar charges are issued for 2 other members of the Coalition in Defense of Water and Life. Oliveira is released the same day, but must report to the police station every 72 hours. It's an interesting bail situation.
It is. I saw that, or I was looking at that earlier today and thought that was a really weird sort of way to do it. Is that like, do you do that in house arrest? I've never been under house arrest. No,
well, under house arrest, they would come to your house.
They'd come to you, right?
And they would come like randomly.
Spoken from experience.
Actually, I had a friend who was on house arrest, ankle monitor and everything, when we were kids.
I remember you telling me about this, actually.
Yeah. The charges against him are dropped soon after, at least. Doesn't really say exactly why. But then here we come back to Bechtel, the good old Bechtel. And not the Bechtel test, that film assessment. No, this is this is a different spelling of Bechtel with a T. And it's a terrible company. Jim Schultz writes to Bechtel CEO Riley Bechtel, asking him to forego pursuing legal action against Bolivia through the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. Bechtel spokesperson Gail Apps responds by stating that, quote, "It is important to understand the difference between water rates and water bills, which depend on the amount of water actually used. For the poorest people in Cochabamba, rates went up a little, barely 10%. So they're just
10% can be a ton.
They're
if you're
defending
poor.
themselves very pathetically. She further suggests that the political instability in Bolivia, rather than people's ire at water rate hikes, was responsible for the civil unrest. So it's not our fault. Their country's just fucked up.
If they would just be quiet and accept this is their life now, it'd be a lot easier for everyone. I think that's what she's trying to say.
Yeah. And she also said, like on this very technical level, that Bechtel's request for dispute mediation by the ICSID does not constitute a lawsuit. It's like, it's not a lawsuit. We're just trying to take money from this group of people. It's not a lawsuit. These lawsuits kind of just drag out, it seems, for a little while.
They usually do.
I mean, I don't know. I don't see how, if it was settled or not. The way it ends on this site is in like April 2002, and it's still like open-ended. Here's a good point by the one of the leaders of the protest group, though.
So in 2000, sorry, I just want to add something because I wanted to look up what actually happened at the end of the case because of the timeline. But in 2006, Bechtel surrendered in Bolivia water revolt case. Bechtel and its chief co-investor, I'm going to mess up words more than you, Abengal of Spain, had been seeking $50 million in a case filed before World Bank Trade Court, the International Center for Settlement, and the ICSID, following 4 years of international public protests aimed at the companies. Bechtel agreed to abandon their case for a token payment equal to 30 cents. So I guess they ended up just getting 30 cents. Multinational corporations want to turn everything into a market, said Oscar Oliveira.
Oliveira.
Why can't I talk? I'm turning into Joe Biden. I look more like him every day. A key leader in the Bolivian water revolt. For indigenous people, water is not a commodity. It is a common good. For Bolivia, this retreat by Bechtel means that the rights of the people are undeniable. So it does look like, at least in 2006, that Bechtel gave up.
They gave up on that lawsuit.
Yeah.
Also, this was a victory just for the city of Cochabamba. I think that there's more to the story as well throughout the whole country. But also that 30 cents payment, that seems so weird. It seems like there must be some technical reason they wanted that.
Well, they wanted $50 million.
No, I know, but I'm saying, like, why take a token 30 cents? Like, it seems so either petty or like strategic to be like setting some kind of precedent. Like, oh, you can like sue a nation for shit like this. See, look, we got 30 cents from them. So then in the future they can like, I don't know. It seems like it's like setting like a legal precedent or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because otherwise, like, it just doesn't make any sense, you know? Like, unless it's just like totally petty thing of like, you got to give us something.
Well, I mean,
otherwise, what's the point? It doesn't make sense. So before they backed down, though, to go back in time a little bit to 2002 again, Oscar Oliveira leads a group of 125 protesters to Bechtel's headquarters in San Francisco. Oliveira urges the corporation to drop its demands for compensation, claiming, quote, with the $25 million they are seeking, 125,000 people could have access to water. Bechtel officials agree to meet with Oliveira. The next day, Oliveira accepts the Goldman Environmental Prize Award. He had been bestowed with the honor the year before, but he couldn't accept because he was hiding from the Bolivian authorities. Yeah, I guess as far as we can see here with all of our deep research, aside from the 6 deaths and like hundreds injured, things basically worked out, at least in the city of Cochabamba, with this water privatization situation.
I'm somehow sure the city of Cochabamba lost. I mean, even though they eventually won this case with Bechtel, I have a feeling the money they had to pump into the case was probably more hurtful to them than the money Bechtel had to pump into the case. What I'm trying to say is I think the people probably still got fucked more in this than the company. Because they always do. Do you know how much water the average human uses a day?
No.
Around 100 gallons. Which is a lot. And it could probably be curbed. But it's not much when you consider like the average golf course per day uses between 140,000 to 130,000 to 140,000, which is a ton. You know, you take a place like Palm Springs that has 54 golf courses. I'm not really sure what 54 times 130,000 is. You can probably figure it out pretty easily. It's a lot. It's millions. Water is a basic human right, but maybe there should be like really heavy taxes on like just inane water use, because there's a lot of inane water use in places like golf courses, or one of my pet peeves is like American lawns, like people who have really big lawns and just pour all their effort into like growing lawns and making sure they have like perfect grass that's not even like grass that's like for their area, that just soaks up more water than it actually needs. I do think that like, I don't want like water to be commodified, but I do think there should be like maybe taxes on water after you exceed a certain amount, or bigger taxes on water after you exceed a certain amount of use, which I don't really think there are.
So things didn't end as happily as we just kind of guessed they would. But so it says, in the end, water prices in Cochabamba returned to their pre-2000 levels, with a group of community leaders running the restored state utility company. So that's good. But then, as late as 2005, half of the 60,000 people of Cochabamba remained without water, and those with it only received intermittent service, some as little as 3 hours a day. Oscar Oliveira, the leading figure in the protests, admitted, "I would have to say we were not ready to build new alternatives." The public utility managers, it's called like SEMAPA, it's some acronym, say they're still forced to deal with graft and inefficiencies, but that its biggest problem is a lack of money. It cannot raise rates, and after Aguas del Tunare was forced out, other international companies are unwilling to give them more loans. So basically, but then that the problem isn't, we can't get another big company to come in here and like overthrow our water system. It's
that there's not money to fix the infrastructure.
There's not money, or maybe that money is being, I'm just guessing here, like distributed upwards to rich people, not fairly distributed throughout the country. Or maybe Bolivia is an impoverished country for reasons that are easily fixable. Like if you look at things on an international scale. But I mean, I'm saying it's anything except for what like the sort of libertarian conservative mindset would say, which is, well, they just have a fucked up poor country. It's their fault,
Can I tell you my theory on why Bechtel took 30 cents in 2006 and just decided to extract from the case? Sorry, I decided to look into Bechtel's business deals. While that case was going on, and I mean, Bechtel was definitely an evil company, there was also this this war brewing in Iraq in the 2000s. I don't know if you knew about that or not.
I got to look into that.
And there was this government, this government, the U.S., us, the government of us, the U.S. They decided to give this company that was doing a great job internationally a $680 million contract to help them rebuild Iraq. And Bechtel's focus went more on rebuilding Iraq, which apparently they did a shitty job of. But I think they just got busy with that and the amount of like wartime money they were getting from the U.S. to not worry about the water stuff.
I guess they could have sated them, but I mean, I think they backed down well before the invasion of Iraq, though. But
the back down from Earthworks said 2006, right? So, sorry, maybe they did. Did they?
Oh, you're right. Ultimately, the settlement was reached in 2006. You're right.
So, and they start getting these contracts for Iraq around 2003, 2004.
Yeah, that might have been the reason that could have contributed to them backing down, but that still doesn't answer the question of why the 30 cents. That's weird to me.
Maybe it was all the court offered them, and they just decided, fuck it, we don't want to deal with this anymore.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious about, like, it seems fishy to me in a way. I don't know. For some reason, I'm skeptical of these evil companies.
Well, I am
and
too.
all of their motivations. So also, while that was going on in Cochabamba, there was also the city of La Paz, and there was a separate water subsidiary. It was a subsidiary of a French multinational company. They were doing the same shit to their city, and there were similar protests went on there. I don't really know how that one panned out, though, exactly. But it was basically the same thing going on at the same time, just in another city with another private company.
I didn't realize that Bechtel was the world's largest construction company.
Did not know that either. I'd never even heard of them until I looked into this story.
They've been involved heavily in U.S. construction since the post-World War II period, which is when they started. They've been responsible for over 20,000 projects in 200 countries, or in 140 countries, sorry. And we have operations on all continents, save Antarctica. Bechtel has not only like done terrible things in Iraq and Bolivia, but it looks like there was also some interesting and water problems that they've caused in India too. Wow, Bechtel's seems like a really not great company. Maybe they're just allowed to get too big. Just one last thing about Bechtel. Just to let you know what Bechtel's doing as of the year 2020, in case you're curious. This is from the Bechtel website, from the NAV themselves. The United States government has formally added 3 more years to the current Bechtel contract to destroy So basically the U.S. government is still using Bechtel for most of its construction process programs, which they're being used both to help make new weapons and to destroy old weapons. So Bechtel has went nowhere. That's all I wanted to let people know. We're still rolling, and
I figured they'd be fine.
I just wanted to make sure that none of these problems they've caused in the world have been fuck. Justice never happens, does it?
Pretty much.
So, should we recommend some bad things? One of my favorite albums of this year is from a British indie rock group that I guess is from Brighton, but they came out with this. They're I should start with their name before I start with the album's name. But I've really been enjoying the British indie rock group Porridge Radio. I think they're really good. They were started by Donna Margolin. It's just kind of like guitar rock. It's a lot of fun. Their new album Every Bad is really good. I enjoy it a lot. Yeah, I recommend checking it out. They're on the secretly Canadian label. I think
I know that
people
label.
would like them. Yeah. That's all I have. That album has been my rotation this week, and I've listened to it a lot. And I don't really have giant takeaways from it, other than it's kind of been on my rotation this week. I've really enjoyed it, and I think other people would too.
Cool. You don't have to give a dissertation like I usually do.
Yeah,
it's probably better not to.
I'm not really.
It's better not to, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to recommend a movie called Burning. It's a South Korean movie.
I've seen that.
It's also just called Burning in the Korean title, in Konglish, whatever. Not that that matters. It's from 2018. It stars Steven Yeun.
Yoon?
You say Yoon or Yun?
I thought it's Yoon.
Steven Yeun, the guy most people probably know from The Walking Dead. He's Korean American, and this is his first Korean film. And
maybe
I asked my girlfriend to judge his Korean level. She said it's pretty good. Because I don't think he grew up speaking a lot of Korean, so I was curious if he learned it really well or not. Anyway, it's a good movie. I guess it's like an indie movie. The plot is kind of minimal. It's just about these. It's kind of you call it almost like a love triangle plot.
Yeah, almost.
In a way, but it's weirder than that. And it's based on a Murakami short story.
I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
Called Barn Burning.
That movie has one or two of my favorite lines I've seen in a Korean movie. I really like that movie too, but there's a point where I think it was the farm boy or the main character is the girl, and her friend that she that has the farmhouse that at some point, I don't remember if it was him or Steven Yeun's character, but they're looking at another Korean, not Steven Yeun's character, even though he's rich in the movie, driving a Ferrari, and is where do all these young Gatsbys come from? And sometimes living in Seoul, it gets real weird because you will see and I'm sure this happens in any major city. I'm sure it happens in New York or Tokyo. You just see the youngest people driving a $300,000 car, and you're what, why, how?
I just assume they have rich parents.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I assume that too, but it's still I don't know.
I do remember that line though, now that you say it.
I just thought it was a really good line in the movie, and then butchered the line. But yeah, the movie's good.
It's good, and I think it's best not to go in knowing much about it. I mean, the plot summaries of it, or the synopses of it, are pretty vague anyway. I went in not knowing too much other than that, like, Steven Yeun's character might be a bit diabolical, but I don't know. It'll maybe surprise you. And it's just good. It's just a good movie all around. Really good acting by the three main leads. I also want to recommend.
Can I make one other comment about the movie?
Yeah, go ahead.
The main girl character in it, she lives in your neighborhood in the movie.
That's true. There's a scene right by the 202
or
bus
our
stop.
Neighborhood, really. Yeah, it's real close to where both of me and Joshua live.
Yeah, I remember there was one shot where they get off the 202 bus, and I'm like, I take that bus all the time, right there. Yeah, it's like literally like a 5-minute walk, if that even, from my house. But yeah, I've actually wandered around the neighborhood looking for the house, the apartment that she's supposed to be in that movie. And
yeah, I looked for it.
I thought I found it once, but then I realized everything looks kind of the same in the neighborhood. But anyway, I also want to recommend. Damn it, where did it go? I want to recommend the idea of. So this is an idea. This is a concept. And it's like I want to recommend the plan, rather, proposed plan of the progressives in the House of Representatives. I want them to withhold their vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker and use it as leverage to get Medicare for All bill on the floor to be voted on. Because it's a funny thing that I realize is that it's never been voted on even in the House. And there are definitely multiple bills that proposing Medicare for All. And the reason is they don't want people to see where, their allegiances really lie if they're forced to vote yay or nay. But this idea, I don't know, I heard, and it's been kind of like floating around, and there's an article about it right in front of me here, and it basically ends with, we still have leverage. The majority of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, want Medicare for All. Demand your representatives withhold their vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House unless she brings Medicare for All to the floor for a vote. The way I heard it described was that only 15 Democrats would need to do this to actually put real pressure on Pelosi. Because if 15 people did withhold their vote for her, it would just mean a Republican would become the Speaker of the House. So I think it's a very practical solution. I don't think it will happen, unfortunately, but I think that also shows the true colors of the progressive caucus or whatever. And I don't want to go on a whole rant here, but frankly, the squad who talk out of kind of both sides of their mouths, in my opinion, about this kind of stuff. There are practical ways to get this kind of legislation on the floor. And, yeah, I wish they would do it. I think they won't, but I wish they would. They shouldn't just give their vote away for free, for nothing, to this terrible, terrible person. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Okay.
Through early morning fog I see visions of the things to be, the pains that are withheld from me. I realize and I can see that suicide is painless. It brings on many changes, and I can take or leave it if I please. The game of life is hard to play. I'm gonna lose it anyway. The loser in Carlisle someday late. So this is all I have to say. Suicide is painless. It brings on many changes, and I can take or leave it if I please. The sword of time will pierce our skins. It doesn't hurt when it begins, but as it works its way on in, the pain grows stronger, watch it grin. Suicide is painless. It brings on many changes, and I can take or leave it if I please. A brave man once requested me to answer questions that are key. Is it to be or not to be? And I replied, oh, why ask me? Suicide is painless. It brings on many changes, and I can take or leave it if I please. And you can do the same things if you please.
The first voice recording was made in 1860. It was a 10-second fragment of the French folk song Au clair de la lune recorded by inventor Edward Leon Scott de Martinville. But who will make the final voice recording and when? What will it be? Who will hear it?